morning.
How are you all this morning? I want to talk about something very mysterious. Today I want to talk about the flexible nature of time. We all know that when we're children, time passes very slowly, particularly when you're in school and you're waiting to get out for the Christmas holidays. And we know that when we get older, it passes very fast. The clock seems to be doing the same thing, but our experience of it is quite different. But it used to be that we thought that time was really passing the same everywhere. It wasn't until Albert Einstein began looking at the relationship between time and space and movement and gravity that we began to understand that time is not a consistent thing at all places, at all times. So just like our perception is not the reality, our perception is an indication of something that we are interpreting, given our experience and our understanding and our ability. But it's not the whole of reality. We already know that we don't see everything that might conceivably be available to be seen. We don't see everything that every other creature sees. We don't see the same colors. We don't hear the same sounds. There are things that elephants hear and things that bats hear that we can't hear. So we already know that our perception is limited, but what it's limited to seems like all of reality to us from our particular perception. And I came across this story in the book, The Art of Possibility. In a rather famous experiment, the men people of Ethiopia were presented for the first time with photographs of people and animals, but were unable to read the two-dimensional image. They felt the paper, sniffed it, crumpled it up, listened to the crackling noise it made. They nipped off little bits and chewed them to taste. Yet people in our modern world would easily equate the photographic image with the object photographed, even though the two resemble each other only in an abstract sense. We are familiar with that comparison, so we immediately know what we're looking at. Recognizing Pablo Picasso in a train compartment, a man inquired of the artist why he did not paint people the way they really are. And Picasso asked what he meant by that expression. The man opened his wallet and took out a snapshot of his wife, saying, "That's my wife." Picasso replied, "Isn't she rather small and flat?" The men people saw nothing but the shiny paper. As for Picasso, he was able to see the snapshot as an artifact, distinct from what it represented. So very often, we find ourselves caught in that dilemma that we are interpreting the representation of something literally as the thing. This is why sometimes it's difficult for us to use our natural ability that we're born with as children to take hold of the mysticism and symbolism of things rather than taking everything literally. Of course, on the other hand, kids take everything literally, but that's a different story. Their imaginations allow them to enter into worlds that we dismiss. So in looking at time, before there were clocks, before we were measuring the passage of time, the way that we did it was by paying attention to the stars and the movement of the planets and the sun and the seasons and our physical bodies. This was how we measured the movement of the days and the passage of time. We looked at the animals, we looked at the trees, we looked at our physical bodies to get a sense of when it was. And in Greek culture and also in Indian culture, there are different words for time. So for example, in Greek culture, kairos time refers to right timing, the rightness of time, the right moment for something. It is a passing instant when an opening appears. It's the moment that is perfectly right for whatever needs to be done, when that moment is the moment that can change everything. That is different than measured time, which is chronos time. And we tend to experience chronos time in the same way as being a taskmaster, quite relentless, the way that it was expressed in art is Saturn eating his own children. So Chronos time is very, very disciplined. Now, we developed measurement of time and clocks, and for a while that was fine, but then we began to use trains. And when we began to use trains, it wasn't enough just to have a general sense of time. I've actually got a picture here on my mind map of Victoria Station in London in the 1800s, we'll say. It might have been earlier than that. And there are 4 clocks on the wall, and they're all different. One says 5 minutes to 9, one says 9:15, another one. And there are guys walking with stopwatches trying to, with their pocket watches trying to figure out how to set their clocks. The problem with that was that when the times on the planet and at the stations and on the trains were not synchronized, there were crashes. So time had to be agreed upon, it had to be synchronized and coordinated, it had to be measured accurately, and there had to be cooperation. And it wasn't just, we agree that it's this time, but we began to be aware of time zones in order to really figure out when things were going to need to be switched on the tracks. Are you with me here so far? So it became a measure of safety to actually be able to measure time exactly for railroad schedules and so on. But time actually does not really work that way when we look at it in the larger context of space. So when our founder in Science of Mind, where I come from in Centers for Spiritual Living, was being developed, Ernest Holmes wrote this in A New Design for Living, which was, he wrote this the year before he died. The spiritual nature of the universe, God, mind, intelligence, from all viewpoints, science, philosophy, and religion, always was, always is, and always will be, without beginning, without end, eternal, immortal, timeless. If we are a creation of that which is eternal and immortal, if we are a creation of God and God is what we are, can what we are be other than immortal and eternal? Now this is interesting, because what is immortal? We think of something that's eternal as a really, really long time. That's not exactly what it is. And we think of something that is omnipresent as being really, really, really big to fill up all of space. But that's not really what it is, because it isn't limited to space or time. It's always here and now in the infinite. It's always all here and now. Now, if that's true, then it also means that our prayer is not limited to time or space. I think we already know in New Thought that our prayer is not limited to space. We know that we can pray for people far away and have it be effective for them where they are, yes? Yes. But what we don't often think about is that's also true about time. If the infinite is not limited by time and space, then our prayer is not limited by time either. So, for example, if Julia is having surgery on Thursday morning, and you've agreed to pray for her before she goes into surgery at your home, and you don't think of it until Thursday afternoon, you can pray for her on Thursday afternoon, and the prayer will already have been effective for her on Thursday morning, because spirit is not limited by time. Does that make sense? From that standpoint, then, could we not also pray for the children that we were at the times when they needed it the most, and thereby change who we were and who we are? If God is not limited by time, then prayer is not limited by time, and what we are is not limited by time. Isn't that a mind blower? Now, beyond that, let's talk about measuring time. I have to say this, Mary Morrissey said once, talking about time and the differences in our experience of time, some people live 99 years. Some people live 1 year 99 times. It's up to us, the quality with which we fill the time that we're experiencing, right? So Einstein had this brilliant dream or image of traveling very, very fast while somebody was watching from somewhere else. And he got the understanding, which has since been validated, that this is special relativity, the theory of special relativity. The faster an object moves, the slower its time runs compared to the run of time to an outside observer. So this is why we say if we send somebody off into space on a 2-year mission, when they come back, they will not have aged as much as the people who are here, because they're traveling at faster speed than we are, even though we're traveling at huge speed through space on this spinning planet. Are you with me so far? It gets worse. The second theory is the theory of general relativity, which says that very intense gravity also slows time for the people experiencing it, similarly to moving at very high speeds, compared to somebody somewhere else. So how many of you, did anybody see the movie Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey? Did you understand it? Mind-blowing, wasn't it? So what happens is that he ends up on a mission where he's out in space and they're looking for planets that might be useful to repopulate from Earth. And he goes reluctantly, knowing that, of course, when he leaves, his passage of time is going to be slower than his family's on Earth. So he wants to come back as soon as he can. His crew gets out to a certain, wherever it is, way out there, and they're traveling really, really fast, right? So time is traveling more slowly for them than people on Earth. And so they know that. And there's a particular planet that is near a black hole, which means its gravity is very, very dense. And 2 of them need to go down to the surface to find out some things about the planet. And they know that the ship that's in orbit, time is going to be passing faster for the ship than it is going to be for them down there in the heavy gravitational field. And so they're trying to complete this thing as quickly as they can. They want to be down there like a half an hour, but they wind up being down there for 3 hours. And when they get back to the ship, the one guy that they left on the ship, 23 years has gone by for him. By the time they get back to Earth, Matthew McConaughey's daughter, who was a young person, is dying of old age. But he's the same age that he was. He's been gone, a couple of years or whatever it is. So when we look at the passage of time, we see that it's the same for everybody that's with us. But relative to us, it might be different for somebody someplace else. So if we take them from where we are and we send them off into this other experience, when they come back to us, their experience of time will show differently than ours. Now, it gets worse. We used to have an atomic clock that we had to update every certain amount of time because it would be 1 second off or something like that. But now, the University of Colorado has a strontium clock that measures Chronos time precisely, which means that if they moved it 1 foot higher, they would have to change its adjustment, because time would be traveling differently 1 foot higher. So truly, people at sea level and people that live in the mountains are aging differently. Not so much as you actually notice it, but according to the way that time actually works. Now, isn't that bizarre and amazing? So here we are trying to decide, what does that mean about the moment that we're in now? The value of the moment that we're in now. If time is not really what we think it is, and if we're not truly limited to time and space in our essence, then so much more is possible to us than we have realized or have made use of. And yet it's very hard to wrap our minds around that kind of concept to actually bring it into a useful place for us. Eckhart Tolle wrote in The Power of Now, most people confuse the now with what happens in the now. But that's not what it is. The now is deeper than what happens in it. It is the space in which it happens. So imagine that what's happening right now is we're all sitting here in this service together, but we are within a realm of possibilities. And that realm is available to us as now. And within this container, things occur, things appear and disappear. We don't know in this next moment if I'm going to burst into song, fall off the stage, take a drink of water, tap dance, if one of you will suddenly rise up and float on the ceiling. We have our ideas about what might or might not happen, but we don't know for sure. We think, you see, that the way that our experience works is we believe in this arrow of time. That time moves from the past through the present and on to the future, which in most of the cultures of the world is ahead of us. There's one culture, I don't remember which one it is, that sees the future as behind us and the past as ahead of us, because we know what happened in the past, but the future is hidden. But is that really true? I want you to close your eyes for a moment and think about something that happened in the past, anytime. Could be when you were a child, could have been yesterday. And think about who was there and anything else that you notice about it. If it was a holiday time, if you were indoors or outdoors, what kind of conversation you were having, how you felt, just kind of remember those things. All right, now I'm going to ask you to open your eyes. Now, is that an accurate understanding of that experience, or is it something that you created in this now moment in your mind? You experienced it right now in your thinking, right? But how do you know that wasn't the origin of it right now? How do you know that already happened? There is some sense now in science in which it looks as if the arrow of time does not necessarily move from the past through the present to the future. That it's possible it might just as easily work the other way around. Think about this. How many of you know what you're going to be doing after the service? You have a general idea of what you're going to be doing? So think about that for a minute. Now, who are you going to be with? Like immediately after the service. Some of you know you're going to go to the bathroom. That'll be the first thing you do. What are you going to do after the service? Think about that for a second. Now, how do you know you aren't remembering that future? It's just the same as what you were thinking about a second ago. It's already happened in your head. Everybody's looking completely baffled. This is great. And this is exactly where I want you to be. Because this is what happens when we try and figure out something that is different than our perception and yet possible in our experience. I want to share something with you here, this little story which I love. This comes from Quantum Mechanics and Reality. Imagine going back in time 3,000 years and encountering people convinced that the world is really a flat disk. And when you hear this, you tell them they're mistaken, that the world is really round. But you become quite embarrassed when they ask you to prove it to them and you find that you can't. After all, their experience conforms to the idea that the earth is really flat. Next, you end up in the year 1495. And in this age of adventurous transatlantic navigation, it's widely known and accepted by everyone that the earth is round. Having just been able to give hard evidence that the earth is round, or having been unable to, you go to a nearby university and ask a young astronomy student to tell you the evidence for a round earth. And he tells you about the recent voyages across the ocean by Columbus and others, and how these voyages were based on the latest navigational technologies and cosmological theories of the day. The flat earth idea simply is not consistent with this new evidence, he tells you. And when you object that our direct experience tells us that the earth is flat, he then explains to you that our direct experience is limited, because the earth is so large, and we are normally limited to only a small part of it. The earth appears flat, even though it really isn't. Our experience, we can now verify the curvature of the earth by subtle astronomical measurements or long ocean voyages. Okay, This young university student tells you in the course of his explanation that the latest cosmological theories assume that the Earth is stationary at the center of the universe. And when you ask him if it's possible that the sun, rather than the Earth, is the center of the universe, he says, that would mean the Earth is moving. We don't experience the Earth as moving. It would also mean the Earth is spinning like a top. We don't experience that either. And most of all, we obviously see the sun rise, move through the sky, and set. This is our direct experience, and there's no evidence to contradict it or suggest otherwise. And once again, you find that you are unable to provide any evidence to contradict these illusions. Returning to the present, you head to a local university to find out the evidence that the sun is the center of the solar system, and you learn about the telescope that Galileo invented and used to discover the phases of Venus, and Newton's laws of motion that explain why we don't feel the Earth moving. So although our limited experience may suggest that the heavens revolve around a stationary Earth, if we expand our experience with telescopes and space travel, then this view is no longer consistent with experience. If cultures in the past have been so deluded about reality, how can we be so sure that our present worldview is real? Is it not foolish to imagine that we're somehow immune to such illusions? That we have figured it all out once and for all? Could it be that our idea of the objective world is an illusion, just as much as the illusion of a flat or stationary Earth? We cannot be certain that there must be an objective world just because that is consistent with our experience. How can we be certain that another reality does not lie hidden beneath our present illusions? So science and physics are already showing us that the nature of form and the nature of time and space are not what we experience it to be, and actually is more in line with what we believe in metaphysics. But it's difficult, even for us as metaphysicians, to line up our deepest belief and action with the scientific truth because it doesn't match our everyday experience. Does this make sense? So we do our work to expand in our consciousness, and at the same time we're conflicted with our everyday experience, which sure looks like, or very often can look like, something else. Yes? And so we turn to the spiritual rather than the literal. We turn to imagination and poetry and art to begin to explain to us things that our logical minds are not yet capable of grasping. When I wrote Coming Up for Air, actually what it is a collection of my favorite quotes from scientists and spiritual teachers and sports figures and artists that inspire us, that lead us into greater understanding. And I want to conclude with two of these that are from Rumi and Abram Joshua Heschel, the great Hasidic rabbi. Rumi, the Sufi poet, said, "Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground." When we look out into a world that is so fragmented and so conflicted right now, it can be easy to despair, to become frightened, to become worried, to become angry, and to lose the thread of a deeper truth because the appearances are so compelling, so dramatic, so convincing, and so insistent, and so ever-present. Abram Joshua Heschel said this: "The search for reason ends at the shore of the known." In other words, reason can only search within the known. Does that make sense? The search for reason ends at the shore of the known. On the immense expanse beyond it, only the sense of the ineffable can glide. This is what we're called to now. The sense of the ineffable. It alone knows the route to that which is remote from experience and understanding. Neither is amphibious. Reason cannot go beyond the shore. And the sense of the ineffable is out of place where we measure, where we weigh. So as important as science and chronos time is to us in living harmonious lives, we have a great need for something more. We have a great need for the felt time of kairos, and for that sense of the ineffable that is our inner knowing of the essence of who and what we are. I want to invite you into that in this Advent season. This is the perfect time of year to welcome the ineffable, to invite it, to open to it, and to allow your understanding and your knowingness to move beyond your experience and your reason into something else, into the realm that is not limited by time or space. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Namaste.
So now we invite you to bring your tithes, your talents, your treasures, bring them physically, bring them virtually to your heart, and relish in that joy of knowing that this time this is really an illusion, and that we have before us and within us everything we need, everything we desire, and all we have to do ever is ask, and it shall be given. So I invite you to do that as we pass the baskets, and consider your joy, and just relish in that joy of knowing that we have everything we could ever need and want, and all we have to do is ask.
May God bless and keep you always. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for others and let others do for you. May you build a ladder to the stars and climb on every rung. May you stay forever young. Forever young. Forever young. May you stay forever young. May your hands always be busy. May your feet always be swift. May you have a strong foundation when the winds of change shift. May your heart always be joyful. May your song always be sung. May you stay forever young. Forever young. Forever young. May you stay forever young.
All right, if you would at this time, please take out your cloth that was in your bulletin, or is in your bulletin. Since there's not enough to make a shirt out of it, we're going to do something else with it. Okay, if you would, please hold this in your hands. We're going to spend a little moment here in silence of thinking of peace. It's the one thing that will change the world.